The roar of powerful engines was the only thing that disturbed the sleepy afternoon peace on the sun-drenched road that sliced through the small town of Ridgefield. That peace was shattered in an instant. A little girl, barefoot and trembling, suddenly appeared, sprinting towards two men in black jackets next to their shiny bikes. Her golden hair was a tangled mess, her face was a road map of dried tears and fresh ones, and her voice, when it came, was a sound that could break the hardest of hearts. "Please, my mom, please save her!" she cried out, her small hands clawing at the air as if trying to grasp the last wisp of hope in her collapsing world. The girl, whose name was Sophie, was only 7 years old, but the pure terror swimming in her wide blue eyes was an ancient thing, something no child should ever know. Her desperate gaze pointed back down the street, where a grim scene was playing out. Two large men were menacing a woman near a stalled car. The woman, her mother Clara, was struggling, trying to yank her arm free as the men shouted at her, their voices sharp and cruel in the quiet air. It was the middle of the day, yet the street was a vacuum of courage. Faces appeared in windows, only to disappear again. Passers-by quickened their pace, their eyes fixed firmly on the pavement in front of them, lost in a sudden collective blindness. They were all frozen, paralyzed by a fear that wasn't even theirs, or by an indifference that was far worse. But Sophie had not frozen. In her panic, her little heart had made a choice. She ran. She ran toward the two men she'd seen earlier, the ones who looked like they were carved from stone and steel. Her mother's car had broken down near the town diner, and she'd seen them then. They were intimidating, covered in tattoos that snaked up their necks and disappeared under the sleeves of their worn leather jackets, which bore the emblem of a notorious motorcycle club. But there had been something else, a flicker of something different. The taller of the two men had watched her when she dropped her little stuffed bear on the sidewalk. Instead of ignoring her, he had bent down, his huge frame folding gracefully, and handed it back to her with a gentle smile that didn't quite reach his eyes but seemed genuine all the same. That man was Cole Maddox. He was a biker with a history he kept buried deep inside. He had once been a soldier in a forgotten war and a son to a family he no longer knew. Now, he was just a man on a long road, trying to outrun the ghosts of his own making, mistakes that had burned his life to the ground. His friend, Ray Bear Holloway, stood beside him. Ray was a mountain of a man, with a jagged scar that cut a path from his temple to his jaw, but his spirit was softer than that of most people who filled the church pews on Sunday. They were just passing through Ridgefield, visiting an old friend, when their path crossed with a little girl's nightmare. Cole had seen her coming. His body tensed before his mind had even processed the sight. Years spent in places where danger was the air you breathed had honed his instincts to a razor's edge. He looked past the terrified child and his eyes locked onto the scene down the road. He saw the two thugs, their body language aggressive and predatory. He saw one of them shove Clara hard against the car, her head snapping back. He heard the other one's ugly, profane shouting. Something deep within Cole, a cord stretched taut for years, finally snapped. There was no thought, no debate, no weighing of risks. There was only movement. The sound of his heavy boot hitting the asphalt was a sudden, determined drumbeat. Sophie watched him go, her tear-filled eyes wide with a fragile, desperate hope, as if she knew that the world was about to be tilted on its axis in the next few seconds. Ray was a shadow right behind him, his normally calm face setting into a mask of cold fury, the quiet rage of a man who detested bullies with every fiber of his being. The two thugs didn't notice them until it was far too late. One of them turned, a smug sneer on his face, clearly expecting a local to be telling him to keep it down. But he had never seen men like Cole and Ray before. Cole didn't waste time with words. His fist was his entire vocabulary in that moment. It moved in a vicious, lightning-fast arc, connecting with the man's jaw with a sickening crack that echoed in the silent street. The man crumpled to the ground, unconscious before he even landed. The second thug, panicked, tried to drag Clara in front of him, a human shield, but he wasn't fast enough. Ray stepped in, his massive hand closing around the man's wrist like a steel bear trap. A bone crunched, the man shrieked in pain, and the struggle was over. It had lasted less than 10 seconds. The street that had been filled with cruel taunts moments before was now utterly silent, the only sound being Sophie's tiny, muffled sobs as she clung to her mother. Clara stumbled away from the car, pulling her daughter into a fierce embrace, her entire body shaking uncontrollably. Cole stood over the groaning men, his breathing even and controlled, but his heart was hammering against his ribs. He saw the dark bruises already beginning to bloom on Clara's arm, the terror that still held her in its grip. Without a word, he shrugged off his heavy leather jacket and gently draped it over her trembling shoulders. It smelled of gasoline and the open road, but it was warm and felt like a shield, like— Clara couldn't form words. She just looked at him, nodding through her tears, whispering, "Thank you," over and over again. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, Cole felt something stir inside his chest that wasn't the familiar burn of anger or the cold weight of regret. It was a feeling he had forgotten. It felt like purpose. The wail of police sirens finally arrived, fashionably late as always. By the time they did, the thugs were whimpering on the pavement. Suddenly, the witnesses who had been invisible before began to emerge from the woodwork, all talking at once, pretending they had been on the verge of intervening. But Clara's eyes never left the two men who had actually saved her. She watched as Cole and Ray turned to walk back to their bikes, clearly having no intention of sticking around for praise or police reports. They were not heroes looking for a spotlight. They were just two men who had known what it was to be broken and, for one brief moment, had found a way to piece a small part of the world back together. As they started their bikes, Sophie broke away from her mother and ran after them. Her small hand tugged on the hem of Cole's vest. "You saved my mom," she said, her voice small but clear. "Can I say thank you?" Cole cut the engine and swung his leg off the bike, kneeling down so that he was at her level, his world shrinking to the space between his eyes and hers. A real smile touched his lips this time, one that didn't try to hide the pain in his past, but simply accepted it. "You already did, kid," he said, his voice a low rumble. She threw her arms around his thick neck and hugged him tightly. He froze for a second, then his own arm came up to pat her back gently. She let go and ran back to her mother, leaving Cole kneeling on the pavement, a strange, heavy warmth spreading through his chest. That evening, as the sun bled orange and purple across the hills, Clara and Sophie sat in a booth at the diner, waiting for the police to finish their paperwork. Across the street, Cole and Ray were sitting on their bikes, ready to leave town for good. Clara left Sophie with a waitress and walked over to them, her face etched with exhaustion, but her eyes glowing with a profound gratitude. She told them she didn't know how she could ever repay them. Cole just shrugged, looking out at the endless road ahead. "Some things don't need repaying," he said. "They just need doing." Clara managed a faint smile. "Maybe people like you," she said softly, "are the reason hope doesn't die out completely in the dark places." As Cole and Ray finally rode out of town, the wind carried a faint sound to them. It was Sophie's voice, shouting, "Goodbye," with all the pure, innocent joy of a child who had been given a reason to believe in miracles again. Cole kept his eyes on the road, but in the fading light of the setting sun, they glistened. He had spent years riding away from the man he used to be, haunted by a feeling of worthlessness that clung to him like battlefield dust. But on that ordinary afternoon, a little girl with tangled golden hair had shown him that sometimes the only way to save yourself is to first save someone else. In the days that followed, the story of the two mysterious bikers became a local legend in Ridgefield. The people who had turned away in fear now told the story with pride, embellishing the details, making the heroes even larger than life. Reporters came looking for the bikers, but they were long gone, vanished down the highway like ghosts, leaving behind nothing but a story and a small, forgotten stuffed bear that Sophie had dropped once more in her rush. Clara picked it up, and placed it on a shelf in her kitchen, a constant reminder that angels don't always have wings and halos. Sometimes they wear leather jackets and ride machines that roar like thunder. Miles away, on an open road that stretched to the horizon, Cole Maddox rode on. For the first time in a very long time, he felt like he was riding towards something, not just away. It wasn't a destination on a map. It was redemption.